Welcome to Heal the Burn. I'm your host, Dr. Stephen Sears. A few years ago, I was sued by a patient who claimed I hadn't sent him to the emergency room for an urgent issue, even though my notes clearly documented that I had done just that. He claimed permanent disability, though the evidence for that was thin. The plaintiff's lawyers combed through my chart, letter by letter, twisting my words into a story about the terrible care I supposedly delivered. It dragged on for 2 years before my old company settled with them. Not because I did anything wrong, but because it was too risky to go to court. I started believing that I had actually screwed up. Not because I had, but because they told it with such certainty and because my mind was already primed to fill in the blanks with self-doubt. I was living inside somebody else's version of events, while also fighting the exhausting loop of my own internal narrative. I didn't realize it then, but I was carrying the weight of more than just the facts. I was carrying the stories, the interpretations, the assumptions. My mind was drawing conclusions based on all I couldn't know. Would we go to court? Would they skewer me on the stand? There was so much ambiguity. That's the thing about the stories we tell ourselves. They can and often do pull us down and contribute to our burnout. Think about some of the stories you tell yourself. I'd predict that happens all day long. Like, why didn't that person respond in a certain way? Why didn't my boss respond to my emails? Why didn't the patient laugh at my joke? For me, those queries are instantly filled in with such negative thoughts like, obviously they hate me. Obviously I'm not as smart as my colleagues, or obviously I'm not as funny as I thought I was. The list goes on forever, really. So here's the question. If these stories can keep us stuck, is there a way to use them to our advantage? So to get into this, I am really excited to introduce my guest today, Dr. Andrea Sikon. Dr. Sikon is the institutional chair of the Department of Internal Medicine and Geriatrics at the Cleveland Clinic, where she oversees a department of more than 380 doctors and APPs. She's founder and executive director of Cleveland Clinic's Center for Excellence in Coaching and Mentoring, which has trained over 2,500 people in healthcare from 14 countries in how to use coaching skills across different roles. The center also runs 2 internal peer coaching programs with outcomes showing increased resilience, engagement, and retention across the system. In addition to being a department chair, educator, and credentialed coach, she remains an active primary care internist and practices part of her time as a consultant in women's health. Andrea brings a rare blend of clinical insight, academic leadership, and deep commitment to finding meaning in medicine. I really can't think of a better person to join me for this conversation today about the stories we tell ourselves. Andrea, welcome to Heal the Burn.
Hi, Steve. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being here. So I just want to start with some background. Could you reflect a little bit on what first drew you to a career in medicine?
It's an interesting question because I have always, as far back as I can think, I've always wanted to be a doctor. So I don't know that it was any sort of sentinel event. It wasn't anything, in particular.
Mm-hmm.
Just I always, as young as I can remember, I always wanted to be a doctor. And
were your parents doctors, or are there doctors in the family?
No, I am the first one. I think the only one, actually. So I don't know where it came from. I don't know where it came. It just fascinates me. It's just the most exciting thing I think that anyone can get to do.
That's great. So did your vision of being a doctor change, by the time you were actually practicing?
I think in subtle ways, probably. I'm sure in pieces, parts. I thought I wanted to be a pediatrician originally, probably because that's what I knew, right?
Mm-hmm.
When I went to the doctor, that was the only definition of a doctor that I kind of, knew. I recognize one of the rare, very, very lucky people in life that had a passion, a calling, a dream, and actually get to live it every day. And that is not lost on me. My daughter's a senior in high school, and I recognize as I try to help her reflect on, well, what are your interests? What do you want to do? And most people are like, I have no idea.
Right.
I just
Right.
always knew, and I get to, and I've been so blessed to be able to be in the role.
That's really, really neat to hear. Were you always intent on a leadership path?
Absolutely not. Yeah, that one's an easy one. Like, uh, no concept that, like, no concept of it or desire for it or that I could even do it or none of the above there. What I do now, and not preconceived in desire nor in could that even be a possibility.
Not in your wildest dreams.
Yeah.
Wow. Thanks for that. You know, in your intro, I mentioned you oversee 380 doctors and APPs. To me, that seems like a big responsibility. How do you keep yourself grounded on a day to day basis?
Um, it does feel like a really big responsibility to me. Like, I take it very, very, very seriously. Probably the hardest part of it for me, in that I feel like, I have such deep commitment and responsibility to having everybody have the chance and opportunity to kind of love their work as much as I do. And I'm deeply committed to that, and deeply committed to, how it goes, trying to fix the sea of problems that get in the way of that. So how do I stay grounded? I have an incredible family, and very grateful for that, and
Hmm.
very lucky to have that.
Yeah.
And I'm very spiritual too, and
Mm.
that really helps me keep me grounded. And I get to do what I love. I love connection, and so that is, I make sure I kind of live as closely aligned with my values as possible. Yeah.
So, I would like to get into the idea of the story I tell myself. Can you tell me what that phrase means to you?
The stories I tell myself, I think we all have self-talk chatter in our heads, right?
Hmm.
It's natural. It's a natural part of being human. And what I've found, I am hugely biased in the value of coaching. Like, it has completely unlocked an entire new world, an entire new way of being in the world for me
Hmm.
personally.
Yeah.
And I've seen it do the same for so many others. So I say that as a disclaimer. I'm like totally sold on coaching. This comes from that coaching lens. And so what I see and what I've heard, and I've been in every single one of those trainings over the last 15 years, and I've been in literally thousands of coaching conversations, and I hear how these stories, these, what we call in coaching automatic beliefs, are called many different things, this kind of cognitive shortcutting, if you will, get in our way. And if we can invite ourselves, not judge ourselves for it, because everybody has it, right? There is just the way we're made up as human beings. If we can invite ourselves into a place of curiosity, true curiosity, and set judgment down, ourselves as
Hmm.
well as with others, what else might be going on here? What other what other stories might there be here, right? What story am I telling myself, and what else might be going on here? It unlocks a world of other perspectives.
So, can I kind of take from that that at some point you had found that the story you were telling yourself was a barrier to your own professional or even personal growth?
I don't think it was a single. a single time. I think that there are some days filled with stories like that, right? Still to this day. It's just like, how quickly can I not necessarily quiet those voices? It's just um, perhaps gently challenge those voices, those right. Not that I hear voices in my head. I just
Oh, it's on
right.
tape, man.
So formal designations for assumptions, generalizations, attitudes, catastrophizing. These kinds of like categories of stories, if you will. So I think no one ever supports me, right?
Yeah.
I never get I'm always the one to do it. The only one, right?
Yeah.
Those are
Yes.
common, and it's not to chastise ourselves for feeling that way. It's to gently challenge ourselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
On those, and sometimes one another,
Mm-hmm.
crossing it into some tools, right?
Yeah. No, that's fantastic. Do you think that the stories that we do tell ourselves could be rooted in past experience? Do they just show up at the moment?
No, 1,000%. I'm not saying they're not justified, and I think that this is where people kind of bristle sometimes and don't understand the concepts. I think that absolutely,
Mm-hmm.
right? There
Yeah.
might be deeply ingrained, like they might have experienced bias, and so that this is their lived experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yet then everything gets kind of interpreted very quickly through this lens. And
Gotcha.
sometimes they might be right. Sometimes though, like it when it happens so quickly, this labeling, right? And then it can be categorized as it just happens so quickly. It
Yeah.
happens without even thinking about it, that we can find ourselves reflecting from a place of just skewed perspective.
Yeah. Do you know why would our brains work to fill in the blanks with these negative interpretations before we even have the whole picture?
Yeah, I think we're bombarded with information, right? Like more so today than ever any time in the past. Like think about like the millions of bits of stimuli and information coming at us.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, medicine especially. There's some statistic out there, and don't quote me exactly on it, but it was like, in the 1950s versus the 1990s versus current day, like how quickly medical knowledge doubles.
Mm-hmm.
And it is like, it used to be years and now it's like days. It's
Mm.
it's like crazy when you think about all the innovation and the technology, and again the immediacy of the world we live in, right? Just
Yeah.
think about just replies.
Mm-hmm.
You order a lab and you get an instant result almost, right? Whereas before in the old days, you used to come from the lab. They like it was slow. It was a slow process, right?
Right.
And
Right.
so we're bombarded, and when we're bombarded, our brain has to adapt and has to make sense of the world quickly, or we'd be paralyzed. So when we try to kind of organize that information and give it meaning, I think we try to find stories and patterns everywhere, and sometimes those aren't necessarily correct.
I'm wondering if you would share a time when you caught yourself telling a story that turned out not to be true and how that shifted your perspective on the situation.
I, I have a really kind of funny one that's totally unwork related, and it just stands out because it was such, I think, like a poignant example. So this was a number of years ago. My daughter, we were having a birthday party for her, and it was back in the day where you would send out hand invitations, handwritten ones, not electronic ones, and
Yeah.
or at least I was still doing that. And so I invited her, and she was young enough that the parents would usually come to. And I was friendly with the parents, and This was her little best friend at the time. And we're at the place, and I was surprised that her little friend didn't come to the party. And I will say part of my brain initially like was started to go to like, oh wow, I like, you know, do they have a fight? Maybe he doesn't like her anymore. Like, right. And then
Yeah.
I was like, no, I was into my coaching already. So I was able to quickly like, nope, nope. I wonder what happened.
Mm-hmm.
Something must have happened, right?
Right, right.
Well, and I was just reflecting on, I wasn't always programmed like that.
Mm-hmm.
I used to be programmed to think about like the all those other kind of thoughts. Are they not friends anymore? Did something happen? Do they
Yeah.
not like one another anymore? What did they do? What did she say? Maybe that, but like, right? Maybe it was something I said, or,
Right.
all those kinds of things.
Yeah.
Fast forward, do you know what happened?
No.
He did show up to the party about a half hour after the party ended and we had left because I wrote the wrong time on the invite.
Oh.
So, like the stories we tell in our head, right? I'll tell you another example. And these are little ones, but they happen so frequently.
Yeah.
I'm at a conference and I was presenting, but I really wanted to hear this speaker.
Okay.
And I could only attend like 15 minutes and I had to get up and leave. So I snuck in the back, like, I had to get up and leave in the end and before it was over. And it was just, they were such a good speaker. I really wanted to hear him. And now when I'm presenting and somebody leaves, you could think, oh, they're not engaged. I might be boring. They don't agree with me. Like, right? Why are they leaving? When it could be 1,000 other reasons why they're leaving, right?
Totally.
So these things happen the time, all the time.
Yeah.
And what I wish as a leader is if I didn't reply to an email, don't jump to, I'm sure there are people who think, oh, she doesn't support me, or, oh, and well, right. And it's probably like, Andrea's buried in emails and like she really wants to see it. And I'm feeling actually inadequate that I didn't see the email and reply, right? So if we could just set them aside,
Yeah.
can you imagine all the upset on the other person's end when it was something simple, if
Yeah.
you will?
No, this is totally right up my experiences for sure. Have you noticed patterns that stand out about these kinds of stories with physicians, particularly?
Certainly, I'm the only one. They don't support me.
Right.
They'll never understand. Kind of all or nothing thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Some is a kind of a generalization or kind of absolutes.
Had you noticed much in terms of like, oh, they get less call than I do, or they
Oh,
have.
I've never heard that before.
Okay, okay.
My patients are sicker than everybody
Oh, that's
else's,
yeah,
right?
right. Or I have a
Um,
black cloud.
yeah,
Okay,
exactly. Or,
cool.
against other specialties, right? And these kind of cross over with implicit bias too.
Yeah.
They're they kind of live in the same sphere
Mm-hmm.
a bit.
Okay. So sometimes I can notice that just one of these storylines can change the tone of my entire day. And
Mm.
when that happens, what would be a good first step to start to rewrite that before it peppers the whole day?
First of all, I I applaud you for noticing that because I think that physicians in particular are so incredibly busy and
Mm-hmm.
they're so wrapped up in listening to other people
Mm-hmm.
that there's really not time or space created to listen to kind of themselves. So I just would say, and perhaps that's a starting point, creating just a quick space, reflection, inventory to kind of self-reflect on just the day. Certainly mindfulness to create, and that's something that is we teach in our coaching trainings around how you can use mindfulness to kind of set down these as a coach, setting down your own automatic beliefs that happen, as well as helping others set down theirs, even if it's just that cleansing breath in the moment to sometimes free up your mind. And then I think getting into the habit of asking yourself questions like, what else could that mean? Wow, they didn't even say hi to me. They're a jerk. Right? Or they don't care. That might be true. What else could that mean? That's one possibility.
Mm-hmm.
What else could that mean?
Do you feel that these tools can totally be self-directed? I mean, do I have to have a coach in order to be effective at doing this?
Can they be self-directed? Yes. I'll slightly reframe your question. Does coaching add to that? Yes. So absolutely, you can self-direct them. It's hard when you're hijacked in the moment to step out of yourself and get meta, right? When you're so immersed in that negative headspace, it's hard to say, okay, Andrea, I'm going to step out and ask myself a coaching question.
Yeah.
That's really hard. So I'm a credentialed coach for many years. I teach other people how to coach. Coaching still works on me, so to speak. Okay. So like I know what they're doing,
Yeah.
and I always say human first. I'm human first, right? So, and I'll ask you that. I know you have trained in coaching, right? As
That's
well
right.
as received coaching, if you will. I'll ask you that question. How would you answer it?
Well, coaching for me has really been transformative. And at the time that I found myself in really just frank burnout, when a couple years ago when I was on the West Coast, I didn't even know what coaching was. And I didn't know that there's so much inside of me that I just can't see because of our own blindness to our own
Mm-hmm.
and perspective on ourselves. And that to me has been, like you were saying earlier, I'm hook, line, and sinker on coaching.
Mm-hmm.
I wish the whole world could do it, and
Mm-hmm.
I use it with my patients, and I use it with my kids, and even I guess with my wife, right? But I, I think that there is a degree that can be self-directed, but man, am I glad that I check in with my coach.
Yeah. Yeah.
um, so you've coached so many physicians through pivotal career moments. Have you discovered ways that really help people in our field grab hold and change the direction of their stories?
I'd say yes. And anyone can do this with effort. It's not like, again, a magical sentinel moment in coaching that unlocks and then, okay, and then that's it forever, right? Like this is how human beings are built. It doesn't necessarily stop that. However, it does change it. You can kind of reprogram, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
and this probably crosses into probably some therapy too. I am not a therapist, however, I'm sure that that's some of that,
Mm-hmm.
and and you do start to see things differently. The stories do start to change.
Mm-hmm.
It's not so much work every time
Mm-hmm.
with that coach approach, so to speak, right? You get used to kind of being curious. And what I love in coaching physicians is they practice it. They love to, they're like, oh, that's a great question. I'm going to go do that with my patients, right?
Yeah.
And so they get to practice it all day long. And then they start to see, like, just like you said, that unlocking that starts to happen. And then that magic. And then I think it's kind of circular. They can start to do it more kind of on their own in their own heads as they're kind of helping others do it as well.
How can leaders foster environments that make it easier for doctors to tell themselves stories that are more grounded in reality instead of going so fast to the dark side?
This is really important. So when you and this I've learned through actually coaching as well, ties directly over to leadership as well, and in all aspects of our life. And in fact, the literature actually started in the marital therapy literature,
Mm-hmm.
from the Gottman. So there's that 5-to-1 ratio of support to challenge. So this is squarely challenge. We are challenging these stories in our head. It's square in challenge. And most people in life, growth comes from a blend of support and challenge. Most people in life don't want to only be supported. They're also seeking challenge because that's where they grow, where they discover, where they reach new heights.
Mm.
And so there's a blend, though, of that. Before people can receive challenge, they have to, which is human nature, we're going to ego protect. That happens for everybody. So all human beings need to be supported, and that ratio is variable in the literature, yet mostly what I've seen in the coaching literature is 5-to-1. In leadership, how can we make sure that we actually turn up the volume and support before we challenge? Because what I think that most people do is when they hear this concept in leadership, a natural, and really even outside of leadership, even in coaching, a
Mm-hmm.
natural approach is, well, I'm going to challenge that with data. I'm going to tell you why that's not right, right?
Yeah.
And people can't receive that. First of all, it's not for the sake of challenge itself. It's really has to be with the true intent of curiosity. Not like I'm going to try to get you to believe something different.
Mm-hmm.
It's more from the lens of, I'm going to invite you into a place of curiosity. It's a different intent. One is like, I want you to think the way I want you to think. The other one is like, I want you to discover something different for
Got it.
yourself,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
What can I do in this situation? What do I control? It doesn't change sometimes events that are happening around us, right? It doesn't change sometimes really awful circumstances. What it does do is change our perspective about those and give us that locus of control back. What I always ask myself, like, I've been through work related, sometimes some really, hard things happen
Yeah.
that are outside of our control. And I think to myself, what can I do? And what can I do?
Mm-hmm.
And those are two different questions in my mind. And that's a way that I've found to be effective to help me challenge and break through some of those beliefs.
So, in the situation like in our clinics where things are important, we've got to keep the lights on, we've got to meet certain RVUs, and we need to motivate our colleagues to keep going. What are some of the ways to help build that motivation?
Yes. So you just used a great word, motivation. So that's a great way to support people. Listening for their motivations is one way in which you can support. Calling out their strengths, listening and knowing their values and recognizing those. As a leader, you set the guardrails and you have to be clear about the expectations. Yet you want to give the keys over, so to speak, as much as you can to the individual so that they can kind of self-determine.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and it looks, as much as it can, look different for different people, even in a subtle way, right? So how can you help like a witness with somebody rather than I'm doing this to you, I'm telling you you need to do this? More like, let's look at this together. This is the goal,
Yeah.
right? And framing it in the terms of what you know is the most important to them, their values. And I think that it's a different approach, and it's a mindset as a leader, and it's an intent.
Mm-hmm.
I always talk about it starts with intent,
Mm-hmm.
and does your impact match your intent? And intent's not enough. You can't just have a good intent and then say, well, that's not what I intended. And, it could still go sideways. So, however, it starts with intent.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that it's really important, really showing that you care too about individuals and
Mm-hmm.
listening, and um, all those pieces are ways to support people
Mm-hmm.
before or while you challenge them.
Yeah. I'm wondering if for any clinician who's listening right now, caught in their own loop of self doubt or negative interpretation, what's the one thing, or what is one thing that you want them to hear?
So I guess, so all those stories that you have in your head, guess what? The person on the other end of that story, if you will, has those stories too. So that's one. May I have two?
Yes, of course.
And I think that some self-compassion too. To be honest with you, I think that docs in particular are their harshest judges. And they really are. I think they hold themselves to such high standards. And I'm not saying that we don't push people and really hold them to high standards. It oftentimes there is that self-drive, that self-motivation, right? And oftentimes it's that self-judgment that is a strong storyline in their head, and just some self-compassion, which they're so compassionate with patients. Directing it to self is almost like, I think in our training, I'm glad it's different these days. I believe it is. I think in the old school days,
Mm-hmm.
it was almost a badge of honor to not have self-compassion, right?
Yeah.
And so and Kristen Neff has a great book, Self-Compassion, and she's just, her work is just really, I think, inspirational to help us kind of think about what is that self-talk, and how can we just find a place of acceptance, and talks about some of those tools that you were asking about earlier, like mindfulness, and um, those are kind of like a lot of core concepts and principles that we use in coaching.
I want to thank you so much for sharing your story with me today and digging into this really common and difficult but surmountable mindset that I think can bring people a lot of strife.
Thank you, Steve.
When I think back to that lawsuit that I talked about in the introduction, what I remember most isn't the legal process, but the story I told myself about it. I let someone else's narrative get into my own, to the point where I started believing it, not because any of it was true, but because I didn't know how to challenge the story my brain was spinning. What I've learned since, and what Dr. Sikon really reminded me of today, is that those inner stories are powerful, but they aren't fixed, and more often than not, they're not likely rooted in reality. That said, the same way our minds can drag us into self-doubt, they can also help us find perspective, resilience, and even meaning when we're taught the correct skills to guide them. We may not be able to stop the inbox from overflowing, or prevent a patient from bringing a lawsuit for that matter, but we can notice the story we're telling ourselves, and we can decide to write a better one. And that choice, that authorship, is the kind of freedom we can carry with us every single day. Please consider sharing this episode with a colleague if you found our conversation meaningful. I'm Dr. Steven Sears. Thank you for listening to another episode of Heal the Burn.